All right, so here is Coach Bekah from the PhD community, Dr. Berry's private community. She is a registered nurse, she is a primal health coach, and she is a certified keto nutrition specialist. And myself, I'm Roxana. I'm a metabolic health practitioner and a primal health coach. So today we are going to talk about type 2 diabetes and maybe other stuff. Keto,
Maybe.
right?
Yeah.
So
Let's
let's
see where it
start by
goes.
saying, what is type 2 diabetes? You go.
Migo? Okay. And it depends on who you ask, which is super interesting. Like, what is type 2 diabetes, right? So, if people don't know, I'm in school to be a nurse practitioner. So I know a little bit more about certain things, just enough to make me dangerous, is what they kind of say in practice. So, when you talk about type 2 diabetes in pathophysiology, and this is my pathophysiology book, and I'm going to read from it because I want people to see the distinction between Western medicine and holistic medicine, if that makes sense. So this is my patho book. And it says that type 2 diabetes characterized by a relative lack of insulin. So,
Lack of
okay,
insulin?
a lack of insulin. Type 2 diabetes is a relative lack of insulin.
Okay, that's I'm not a nurse or a doctor, but I know that's wrong.
I know, right? So this is what they're teaching us nurse practitioners. So that the processes instrumental in producing the relative lack of insulin are insulin resistance and beta cell dysfunction. Okay, we're getting a little closer to the truth. A little closer. Insulin resistance, right? It's defined as a requirement for more insulin for the same biological action. This is all true. Now, here we're getting into some little more meat, along with lowered glucose utilization at all levels of insulin concentration. Okay, maybe. A decreased number of insulin receptors and such post-receptor defects as decreased action of GLUT, which is GLUT, are associated with insulin resistance. So, and then it's categorized as being a progressive disease. So it's progressive. So one of the things that strikes me is that it also, a lot of definitions talk about it being glucose intolerance. Okay. So I find that super fascinating. However, if you go and you really look at what causes type 2 diabetes and what it actually is. Type 2 diabetes is actually hyperinsulinemia. So your body, for some reason, is needing more and more insulin to keep blood glucose at the level that it needs to be. So insulin's going up, but your blood sugars might be staying stable, right? So in the
That's why most
beginning,
people who are hyperinsulinemic don't know that they have a problem because their A1C is fine.
exactly,
I
right?
think that can go
So
on like for 10 years or so.
it can go on for a long time. I think I can't remember how long Dr. Bickman in his presentations, say it can go on for.
It probably
But it's like
varies, yeah.
it probably, and eventually it gets to the point where you're maxed out. Your insulin is it's pumping out, and for some reason it's never enough anymore, and your glucose starts to rise. Your hemoglobin A1C starts to rise, and now you're type 2 diabetic. Never in the actual hyperinsulinemia model do you ever hear that it's a lack of insulin. But providers are being taught it's a lack of insulin. That's interesting, right? It's a relative lack of insulin.
Interesting. It's plain wrong.
It is. And I mean, I guess if you're wanting to really be very like philosophical about it and go outside the box, you could say, I guess technically it is a lack of insulin compared to the amount of glucose you have. You just ain't got enough. You just can't pump out
It's
enough.
not enough insulin to get your glucose under control, but the amount of
Yes,
insulin you already have in your body.
is
And then the next
astronomical.
step would be, I'm going to say shooting insulin, but you know what I mean? Like,
They're shooting up insulin. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. Exogenous insulin. So you have to, start injecting it.
You're going to
so
add more insulin to an already hyperinsulinemic situation.
Yeah. So, what causes it? There's a lot of factors that cause, you to start being insulin resistant, which is where you all of a sudden you've got this down regulation of insulin receptors on your cells, because there's a lot of glucose and your like cells are like, hey, I'm full. There's no more room for you in the party.
They're shutting the door from the inside.
Yes. So, the insulin receptors are like, yeah, down regulations, there's no more doors open. So when you have these things happen, so sugar rises in the blood, more insulin is being pumped out, but nothing's going anywhere because the doors aren't opening anymore. So there's a lot of things that cause insulin resistance. And this is where you can put the picture up. So this picture is from this book, the Ketogenic book from the Nutrition Network. This is Tim Noakes's project, has many wonderful people who actually contributed to this, like Dr. Eric Westman. He's one of my favorites.
Okay, I'm going to put the picture up.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
So these really are these are the pathways that cause the chronic insulin resistance, increased stress, and all the hormones that go along with stress, micronutrient deficiencies, impaired sleep. Impaired sleep ties right back into that chronic stress. Pain
and
ties right into stress.
Deficiencies would be like vitamins, minerals.
Mm-hmm. So yes, versus macro, which would be like protein, fat, carbs. Micro, this is your vitamins and your minerals. Overnutrition. So I think that's interesting that they call it overnutrition. Then you have systemic inflammation, which also leads back to a lot of that chronic stress. Inflammation releases cytokines. Then cytokines, increase insulin resistance. Obesity. Obesity also. Gut microbiota. Microbiota. I can never say that word very well. So that's a new one that's coming out more and more and more recently, is talking about the gut microbiome and the immune system and how that also leads to insulin resistance. And that's pretty cool. So pollution. This is interesting because Ben Bickman showed that in that diesel, they did a study on diesel exhaust increases hyperinsulinemia and like insulin resistance and things of that nature. And it was a pretty interesting study that he talks about. So your medications also. So you may have a perfectly great diet, everything's fine, except you're taking glucocorticoids for something. So those steroids are going to cause increased glucose, and then the increased glucose will increase insulin. And glucocorticoids like cortisol also inhibits insulin. So there's like this weird feedback.
I think
antipsychotics. Yeah, so atypical antipsychotics. My daughter was on one. She was on the second generation, and it causes pseudo Cushing's.
Oh.
And in Cushing's is too much cortisol. Your adrenal glands are overproducing. And when that happens, it leads to insulin resistance and diabetes. And this is documented in the literature. So it's really hard to fight. Once you even go off those medications, it's really hard to fight. But a lot of people who are on the antipsychotics do end up with some degree of metabolic syndrome. Inadequate sun exposure or excessive sun exposure. I find that interesting. I have no idea how that works. I would have to.
Well, if you have
to go do a deep
sunburn,
dive. If you had a sunburn,
an immediate stress, and that would cause cortisol to be
true, and pain. There'd be pain involved in it too.
Pain too. It's inflammation too. So that's a lot.
I could see that, but inadequate, I would say that might also tie into the micronutrient deficiencies because you're not getting enough vitamin D.
Yes.
So, but that would require a deep dive for me as well. So, insulin resistance isn't pathological in and of itself. However, the hyperinsulinemia of the insulin resistance is what is pathological. So I think that, it's something that we do need to, be aware of. But yeah, so eventually it'll get to the point where your body can no longer keep up with the blood glucose. You end up with type 2 diabetes, and now you have to decide how to manage it. Like, are you going to go the
I'm
way
gonna
of
stop
Western medic?
sharing for
Yep.
now.
But are you going
No,
to
we're
go
back.
the way of Western medicine, or are you going to go the holistic route? So there's your two choices. There's really no other choice for type 2.
For type 2, I find it interesting that the ADA recommends a diet high in carbs. So they say
Well,
your food basis should be grains, and then you need just carbs, like straight sugar. Then fruit is straight sugar. Vegetables, there's some higher and some lower in sugar.
I
And
would say
then you have
fruit
a
is
little tiny
worse.
bit of protein. And you should
Mm-hmm.
use fat sparingly and only seed oils. So
Which is kind of weird, because if you flip that upside down at work, well, let's just look at the base and go up to the top. Like, insulin response is less with fat. So
yeah, it's
why
the
would you
least
have
with fat.
people? So why would you have that sparingly? So, and on a basis of an insulin response, I mean, unless you've got maybe you might have a financial reason.
I know.
No, they would never do that. Do you think that the ADA would do that?
Um,
Hmm.
I mean, that would be too obvious, right? If they had
Would be
sponsors
very
like
obvious.
kidney
Dialysis centers.
clinics, yeah,
Mm.
dialysis clinics. And if they sponsored recipes that promoted splendor and sugar,
Mm. Mm. That would be pretty obvious. What about Coca-Cola? The companies that
I
own those
heard that they
drinks.
are actually invested in some big food. And
Interesting. No, there's
yeah,
no conflict of interest there at all. Not
no, but
not
I
not
find
any
it
at all.
funny that their logo or their slogan is connected for life. And
Well,
yes,
because you are going
you
to be
sure
connected
are
for
connected
life.
for life because you're not going to get better. And um, they say in your textbook that this type 2 diabetes is chronic.
Mm-hmm.
My doctor used to say it's chronic
Oh.
progressive. So there's really nothing you can do
Mm-hmm.
once you're on insulin for life. And that turned out not to be true. I mean, if you eat the ADA diet, then yeah, then it's chronic progressive because you're just pouring
We have a
like
guest.
to say it like Barkay says, you're pouring carbs down your neck. That's
Yeah.
not going to help because they are going to
Oh.
just spike the insulin and the glucose. It's not going to work. No, but like my A1C was 8.5 and I was on 50
Mm.
units of insulin.
That's
And
crazy.
now I'm on 0 units of insulin. I don't take any other diabetes meds.
Funny that it's progressive, isn't it? Huh.
Yeah, turned out not to be true. And then when you look at the
Mm.
literature, you have many studies that show that you can reverse diabetes. I mean, type 2 diabetes.
Interesting.
I know. I would say it's funny, but it's actually not because
It's not.
people lose their eyesight, they lose their limbs, they can't work anymore, they lose their jobs, they cost the society a ton of money. It's if the breadwinner of the family is affected, it's just a devastating situation. So when I think about this, it's pretty shameful.
It is. I'm going to send you a picture that you can. I'm gonna if you can look at it, and then you can decide whether you want to post it. I'm not shown this to anybody. Well, not anybody inside the community, I should say. And then you can
So
decide
this
whether you
video
want
is
to show
going
it.
to go on YouTube public, so you need to know what you're
It's a
saying.
Well, it's not like my brother is actually going to watch this, and he's the only one that might actually like not want this put out there. But it's not his leg.
There's a lot of
I'm
good
just
images. Like there's one image of the major food corporations that provide basically all products that are sold in grocery stores, and it's just like a handful of
yeah.
corporations. They're all intertwined.
It really is interesting. And did you know that the cigarette company Philip Morris bought a whole bunch of big food?
Yeah, it's the same playbook. I think Professor Lustig wrote about it in his book Metabolical. I can put a link later in the description.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, put a link in the description because I've listened to Metabolical. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says, but what he talks about and just the behind the scenes stuff that goes on, the fact that, you know, a cigarette company gets hit with a major lawsuit and then they're like, I'm just going to go buy up a whole bunch of big food.
Yeah.
Like, I found that
Can you hear that beep in the
super
background?
fascinating. I do not.
Okay, good.
So I am sending
the
you
food
this
companies,
and you
no,
can
the cigarette
decide.
companies, they knew that their cigarettes, that their products were addictive. They said they weren't, and they said that I think even in front of Congress, but they were addictive, and then they had to admit it finally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the same playbook, if you make your food addictive, you're going to sell more of it. If you make it
Well, yeah.
addictive and nutrient, like devoid of nutrients, people are not only be addicted to the hyperpalatable foods, they also want to eat more because the body sees, okay, I'm missing nutrients, so eat.
Yeah.
And this way, they can sell more food. So it's the same playbook. They make people addictive, they can sell more food.
Well, and then you have the government telling people to eat less and move more. And even, you can eat in a calorie deficit for a short period of time. But even Dr. Bickman, if you listen to his lectures, he will tell you that hunger will win out eventually. Eventually, yeah, you might lose weight in the short term as you starve your cells, but eventually hunger will turn on to the point. Like that is one of the biggest drivers. There's two basic drives in. Hi, whoa, that's cool.
The camera reactions when you do this too long.
Sorry. I talk with my hands. Sorry. So, there are two basic biological drives that we have as humans: hunger and sex. Those are the two, because you need to live and you need to perpetuate the species. Those are the two biological drives. And if you try to shut down hunger with not eating enough, eventually, when you have a buffet in front of you, you will eat too much. You will start overeating.
It's not a matter of willpower. It happens. It's the same when you are trying to hold your breath, but that's more immediate. You can only hold your breath for so long, and even when you pass out, you're going to breathe. So it's the same with hunger. And people who don't feel that, who have no problem controlling it, they can just not wrap their head around this, that this might be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it's interesting though. You talk about food, you talk about like, well, what is causing, let's go back to talking about the pathophysiology of it. Well, what's causing the increased blood glucose? If you look at the response to food, you have two insulin phases to eating, right? You have a phase 1 and a phase 2. And if you're eating protein and fat, you're going to have this pretty easy spike, right? You're going to have no phase 1
more
on
like
a keto. Yeah, and on a ketogenic diet, you don't even have a phase 1 response. You just have one response, one single response. In somebody who's in a high carbohydrate diet, you have that phase 2 response, or the phase 1 response, then this phase 2 response, to bring the glucose down. You have the initial bump that the pancreas is like, the beta cells are like, I got a little in reserve. We're going to go ahead and throw it out. And then it's like, oh, that wasn't enough. Now we're going to make more, and, in response. But what's it in response to? Well, if fat does not raise insulin very much, very little, very, very, very little, and protein a little bit more, but not a whole lot, what else could it be? Going to be carbs.
I'm going to take a wild guess. The carbs?
It's going to be carbs. And so in today's society, all of our foods are full of sugar. Like maybe I can't go.
This is something
I
we need
can't
to
go
say
in
too.
Yeah.
Carbs is bread, is sugar, juice, fruit, potatoes, corn. Those are all high carb foods. So
Yeah.
saying, for example, oh, an orange or a banana is a whole food and that's healthy. No, it's also full of sugar.
It's full of
A
sugar.
banana or an orange.
The only thing that I will give, the only place where I will give give in at all is that fiber. Because fiber actually, I don't know if fiber actually raises your blood glucose. But fiber is,
there's fibers that do. All carbs are turned into glucose except for fructose. All
yes,
carbs.
but fructose is just bad.
Fructose is just bad. But what's
Just
half
bad.
the sugar in an apple or an orange or a banana? It's fructose.
Yeah, fructose. Yeah. And we can't measure that. And we can't measure the damage that does. So if you have a fruitarian, I would hate to see what they're, do we have one now?
The
Or that we know
glycation
of?
damage from fructose is about 7 to 10 times as bad as glucose.
I just know that people who eat a lot of fructose, their livers are like really fatty.
Yeah, obviously, because fructose is mainly
processed in the liver.
Processed in the liver. So it's processed a little bit in the intestines, but mostly in the liver. Triglyceride, it will go straight to triglycerides, and that's going to go straight to organ fat, mostly in the liver.
Organ fat, yeah. I find that very interesting that we haven't figured out an actual test yet. Like one that's, no, because fructosamine does not look at fructose. It's very the name of the test is misleading, but I don't think that we have an actual test that like tests the amount of fructose. Yeah, I don't think we do. At least not from what I've seen. And
but
if
we know
we do,
the amount of fructose in fruit, the amount of fructose in high fructose corn syrup, which is even like worse.
Yeah.
And so we know all that. And I'm not saying no one should eat fruit because of the fructose.
But it's corn. It's a vegetable, right?
Yeah.
High fructose corn syrup. It's a vegetable.
I'm not going to tell anyone not to eat fruit, but the thing is, when someone is already metabolically compromised, when somebody already has a fatty liver, then yes, they also need to watch their fruit. And people think fruit is like a free go, like you can just eat as much as you want and then peel 5 oranges and eat them. That's like way too much, way too much.
Well, I mean, and I think that you hit the nail on the head. Like you have to be metabolically healthy to handle some fruit. Like I let my son and my daughter have strawberries. My son eats watermelon, but he's also metabolically healthy. Like he still is remaining in ketosis. He's not getting knocked out, and he eats very high fat. You know, he stays on his worst days. He's like 50 grams of carbs. You know, so
that's perfect.
On his worst, yeah. So he versus a type 2 diabetic that probably shouldn't be eating the whole watermelon. My son ate a whole watermelon and he got really sick.
Influencer that turned from carnivore to eating carbs again. I'm going to name his name. He drinks the
Does he
juice
like honey too?
of a...
Does he like honey too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we know that I know who it is.
So he drinks the juice of a whole watermelon every day.
Oh, so this is why Dr. Berry put out a video about watermelon juice.
Okay, yeah, maybe. Obviously, 93% of the population is metabolically sick. So it will not work for most people. And I'm not metabolically recovered yet. I mean, my glucose is fine. My insulin is still too high. I'm not done with my journey. I've been on this journey for 5 years.
What was your last fasting insulin, if you don't mind me asking?
Say it. 13.
Okay,
so
that's still not bad. Like,
yeah, not the way it used to be, but it's still a little tad more than
it's a little, yeah, by 4. They really want you. Dr. Isabella Cooper says anything in the single digits. You're only 4 off, girl. 4 units. That's not much. You got
Yes.
this. By the time you're
And I'm
done with
going to
Lyme
see
diet, you're going
when
to
I get
be
my labs
down.
back, I'm so psyched to see what this carnivore or lion diet now did for
Lion
me.
diet's
Because,
done.
yeah, for the
Interesting.
past 5 weeks, I've been eating nothing but beef, salt, and water. And I do mix in some of these
The lemon,
true
the true
lemon.
lemon. Well,
Yes.
here, it's interesting. Speaking of insulin, um, when I first got my fasting insulin checked, and now you got to remember this was last year in July or September of last year. I got my fasting insulin checked for the first time ever. I've still been on a ketogenic diet since 2018. I've never had my fasting insulin checked. It was
How was it?
12 point something. And I was
Oh, so
like,
we are really close.
yeah, so I was really upset because I was like, I've never even been diabetic. Like, why would it still be in the double digits? And I ran across some studies about stevia,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, oh, stevia is one of the only non-nutritive sweeteners that actually gives you an insulin response. That was
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And you can find these out there. I can send you an email with some of the ones I found. And I was like, that's interesting. So I decided to keep I did like a 30-day challenge with myself, and I kept my stevia use because I love stevia. I use it in my coffee, in my tea, if I drink tea. Like if like it's in my element. I love my element. Like so I'm like, eh. So I kept it to just in the mornings. Why in the mornings? Because, yep, element. Because in the morning is when your cortisol and insulin is going to be a little bit higher when you are first waking up during the dawn phenomenon. So I was like, I'm going to keep it to just here. The rest of the day, it's going to be,
Topo Chico.
or just sparkling water or raw element with some lemon in it and see what happens. Doing that. And I did not have anything except water, straight water, the morning of my fasting insulin. It went down to like 8.8.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
So, that's one of those things where I was like,
I think one of the reasons why my insulin is higher when I measure it is that I have to drive about 3 hours to get it tested. And
ooh, the stress. Ooh.
yes. And so it messes up. I have to eat late so that the fasting window isn't too long. And then I still have to get up early to get there, which is earlier than I would usually get up. So it's always when I get there, my fasting
You're not
glucose is
enough.
a tiny bit above 100. And
Yep.
I wished I could have that closer, that test.
I'm waiting for the day when we have an insulin, a continuous insulin monitor.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So we have the continuous glucose monitor,
Yep.
which is hated by some of the Twitter folks or X folks.
I can't wait. I can't wait till they come out over the counter. I'm going to be
We
slapping
have
one
the
of those suckers
ketone
on.
monitor. Oh,
I can't
CGMs are
wait.
now available over the counter.
They
Or
have
they
not come
just,
out yet.
the FDA just approved them. So it's going to be
August.
this year that you can buy
August.
them over the counter. You don't need a prescription anymore.
And
You have the
I want
ketone
people to know
monitors.
those threes. I want people to know which three those are so they know what to look for. If you're interested in a continuous glucose monitor
So
over the
it's
counter,
Abbott, Libre.
the Abbott has the Lingo is for non-diabetics. So you have the Lingo non-diabetics. You have the Rio, which is for type 2 diabetes. And then you have the Dexcom Stello, and that is also going to be over the counter. So you can, August
What about the
is when
Libre?
they're coming out. What Abbott did is they brought it out as the Lingo, and then they bought
Oh,
it.
okay.
So they're going to have the Lingo and the Rio. So the Lingo is going to be for people who are biohackers, And then the Rio
Okay,
is
got
going to
it.
be people with diabetes who's not on insulin, because usually for insurance to pay for it, you have to be on insulin, or you have to be on insulin. So they're bringing one out for those people who are type 2, not on insulin, and they're going to have a very competitive price point. I think it's really cool, though, that we've got 2 companies that are going to be over the counter battling it out. That was perfect, though. That was perfect. They're going to be
That's right,
battling it
yeah.
out for the market. But yes, so I want the continuous ketone monitor. That would be great whenever they
And
decide
then
to bring that out.
continuous insulin monitor. So in Canada, it's the Dexcom and the Libre. They are both over the counter, but they are very expensive. So in
Okay, see,
Canadian
I tried to
dollars,
get, how much
it's
is it? Yeah, how much is
$300 for
it?
for a month for the
300 for,
Dexcom for a month for the Dexcom, and for the Libre it's $180. So it's 90. You can get them for $90 for 14 days. So for a month it's about $180. I know.
shoot, if I'm gonna do that, I'm just gonna go to Signos or Levels and pay the ridiculous amount of money to them and get their coaching support
Well,
and their
now
app and
that
all
they
that
become
crap.
available without prescription, because before in the US you had to have a prescription, and that made it more expensive. Now we can just cross the border and get it there.
It's there's gonna be some. So then Canada's gonna have to drop their prices if they want to keep the
They
business.
might, not sure, because most Canadians won't cross the border just to do that. But like
No, but you can
before,
pay us
people were
Americans
crossing
to
the
send you
border
one.
from the US to get cheap insulin in Canada, which is, it's not cheap, it's just less
Cheaper.
expensive. It's not as expensive. It's the same stuff. So
Yeah. It's amazing how insulin it takes. You know how much they sold that patent for? It was something ridiculous, like $1.
yeah.
And now it's like a bazillion-dollar industry.
Yes. Because that first insulin that they patented was different than the ones they make today.
It's frustrating.
And you can tell me anything you want about them having to get the investment back and the labs and whatever they did to develop this. Humalog has been on the market like forever. And
You don't
why
want to
is
know
it
my response to that
$30 a
because
vial
it's not nice.
in Canada and $300 a vial in the US? That makes no sense.
Yes, it does. It's called greed.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Okay, that makes sense.
It's called sin and greed. So it depends on, what your belief system is, but it's sin and greed in my little world. Like,
So
it's just evil.
coming back to the type 2 diabetes, because we don't want to stray too far, even though that is all related.
Yep.
The one thing I learned recently was that insulin resistance might not be a pathology. And that kind of like piqued my interest.
I thought that was interesting when you said that.
Yeah, the explanation was that it is just a response of the cell that makes sense, because the cell is full of sugar or full of fat, and then it's closing the doors and saying no more. And then we come with insulin shots and basically brute force our way into the cell, and then it gets overstuffed and damaged. Or we take drugs like metformin or supplements like berberine, and they trick the cell into thinking, oh, I'm more insulin resistant, I'm more insulin sensitive, so I can let in more sugar or fat, and that's going to damage them. So no matter what medication you use to get more insulin sensitive or lower the glucose in your blood, unless you pee it out, is going to damage the cells. It's going to circumvent the protective mechanism the cell has. So I thought that was interesting, that insulin resistance, whether it's during the teen years or during pregnancy, it's a protective mechanism. So I'm now against taking any medication unless you have a very high sugar level, and then you need to lower it, because a high sugar level is also damaging.
In the interim, I think that, and acutely, yeah,
right.
If you've got somebody that's got a sugar of 600 or a blood glucose reading. Let me get off the backwoods slang. A blood glucose reading. You need to give them some insulin. Let's get them down, and then let's make a plan. And we have to start doing a long-term plan. In a short term, it's a great idea. Metformin, I think that metformin is actually a pretty decent benign drug. And it can be used short term. It should never be long term. Oh, in the realm of diabetic medications, though, it's really the most benign.
But when you look
like,
at
out
it,
of all
what
of
they
them.
do is they say, okay, you got to eat better. And everyone thinks, okay, I'm going to eat whole grains.
Whole
I'm
grain.
going to eat lots of vegetables, lots of fruit, and very little red meat and no saturated fat. So that's their thinking, I'm going to eat better. Yeah. Run up to.
Reminded
So
me
then
of
they add
something.
metformin. The next one they add, I don't know, Trulicity or something, and then they add insulin. So it's going to be one until they have to add insulin. And that's the wrong way to go about it. The better way to go about it is to lower the macronutrient that most spikes the insulin.
Yes. Well, yes. However, in our pathophysiology book, let us see what they say about nutrition.
Ooh, tell me.
Nutrition has often been called the cornerstone of diabetes therapy. Ideas about the optimal dietary prescription have been far from constant throughout recorded history. So, in a position statement, the ADA has listed 4 recommendations for nutritional therapy in patients with diabetes. So this is in box, let's see, box 4041. To maintain, I don't even know if I can read it. Okay. To promote and support healthful eating patterns, emphasizing a variety of nutrient-dense foods in appropriate portion sizes to improve overall health and specificity. And specifically, attaining an individualized glycemic blood pressure and lipid goals. Okay, attain individualized glycemic blood pressure. This is a pathophysiology book, guys. I just wanted you to know that. That makes no sense. Whatever. And lipid goals. Achieve and maintain body weight goals. Delay or prevent the complications of diabetes. So, address individual nutritional needs based on personal and cultural preferences, health literacy and numeracy, access to healthful food choices, willingness, and ability to make behavior
Some
changes.
people can't be helped.
Oh, right?
And the other thing is that the ADA says the A1C to strive for is below 7 for diabetics. Now.
Oh, well, it says this last one is the best one. To provide the individual with diabetes with practical tools for day-to-day meal planning rather than focusing on individual macronutrients, micronutrients, or single foods.
Yeah. No, what gets me most though is this recommendation for diabetics to strive to be at 7, an A1C of 7 or under. And the thing is, at 7%, you are going to have
damage.
Complications.
It starts at 5.7. Studies have shown that an hemoglobin A1C of 5.7, which is pre-diabetes, that's when the complications start. That's when the damage.
And actually, Nick Norwitz did a video on this, and he said that the progression or the risk of complications is linear. So it's not 5.7 and then up and then 6.4 and then up again, but it's kind of linear. So if you have an A1C of 5.6, you're technically not pre-diabetic, but you're on your way. And
you're on your way,
you need to lower that, and you need check your insulin. And the other thing, the ADA, I think, was it Gary Taubes who did the talk on that? I think, yes. So he said the ADA at one point had to decide which way they go. do they say we're going to prioritize glucose control, or are we going to prioritize lipid control? And they went to prioritize lipid control. So as long as the lipid are in range, they don't care about the glucose. And that's detrimental. I mean, an A1C of 7 is borderline. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to incriminate myself, but like it's, in my opinion, it's malpractice.
It is malpractice. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's malpractice. But here's the problem. For it to be malpractice, there has to be malice involved. There has to be like you did something knowingly, like
but
legit knowingly. Here's
that an A1C of 7 is causing complications.
But they don't. No, they're teaching the people in my class. They thought that I was crazy when I was like, well, shouldn't we be aiming for a lower? They're like, well, you should, but not everybody can achieve that. So 7% is good. And I was talking to one of my classmates and I was like, can I tell you something? And she was like, yeah, because we were studying for a test. And I was like, you do know that damage for diabetes starts at hemoglobin A1C of 5.7. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, then why are we telling people that they should aim for 7? I was like, light bulb. She's like, but that's
not really aim, but 7 is still A-okay. And the thing is, if diabetics are using insulin, there is always a risk of going hypoglycemic. And this was also talked by Gary Tobbs. He said hypoglycemia is always caused by an overdose in insulin. I mean, there's also reactive hypoglycemia, but if you're on insulin,
but that is still an overdose. Maybe not an overdose, but an over secretion of insulin. I mean,
so the ADA is probably terrified of diabetics on insulin to go hypoglycemic, and I understand that.
Yeah.
So the first line of action should not be to up the recommendation where they should be. The first line should be lower your carbs.
Remove what is causing it.
Yeah, and they actually have that on their website, but it's
buried.
It's not front and center.
Buried.
It should be. Yeah, I know. It should be front and center.
I think somebody said that on their diabetes statement, it was like so buried. It was on like page 27 of like 50 or something. It was like some little blurb in there. But, and it's interesting too that it's, we do diagnose diabetes off of, and this is a semi-tangent. I just want to go on a tiny tangent. I don't think that we need to look at hemoglobin A1C to diagnose diabetes. I think that it should be used in conjunction with things to diagnose.
Yes,
because
always.
And one of the reasons is because of like hypothyroidism. You can have an elevated hemoglobin A1C in the absence of elevated glucose.
Which is then a false A1C reading, yes.
Yeah, so there are people that have been diagnosed as diabetic, and it's because they have an undertreated thyroid, and so their A1C rises, and so does their glycated albumin. So it's neither like, so if you have a hypothyroid patient that all of a sudden their A1C is going up and you check a glycated albumin and that's up, you should probably just slap a continuous glucose monitor on them and see how they're doing. Or if they're on a standard American diet, you could do an oral glucose tolerance test. Or if you're not on a standard,
one funny thing. Every time I tell someone, okay, I've been keto for 5 years and now a lion diet, a lot of the time I was carnivore. And they say, well, you're still diabetic because you will not pass a glucose tolerance test.
Oh, Dr. Bekah, have you seen his talk on it?
No.
He's like, yeah, you'll fail a glucose tolerance test, and you're supposed to be fasting for 12 hours. 8 hours before, eat a little bit of carbs to remind your pancreas how to work.
Because then you wake up your pancreas
Yeah.
And it will have
And
the
you'll pass with
first
flying colors.
phase response that you said that
Yep.
people on a low carb diet don't have because they don't need it.
Yep.
That needs to get into gear. And then, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm a sugar addict, so I cannot drink that solution. That would be like an alcoholic drinking just
I
a
would
tiny sip of
vomit.
alcohol. I can't. Like I would
Like
refuse the test.
I was on a standard American diet when I was pregnant and had to do that test.
Yeah.
And I was like, what happens if I vomit it up? She's like, then we have to abandon the test. You have to come and do it again. I was like, and what if I
Awesome.
puke the next time? They're like, you have to do it again. I'm like, what? Why do I have to do this? Like, but I did it. But it made me sick to my stomach. It was just too much. Sorry.
Yeah, it is too
I
much.
keep
It's
having a
completely
guess.
crazy. They can just tell people to wear a CGM, and that's just
Yep.
as well. The one thing, Dr. Boss did a talk at Ketopalooza last year, and she explained A1C.
Mm-hmm.
So she explained if you have 100, and they were 100, like red blood cells on the graph,
Mm-hmm.
on the graphic, and 4 of them were glycated.
Yep.
And she said that's an A1C of 4.
4%. Yeah.
4 out of 100, but it was so it's such a good visual. And then she had 5, and that's an A1C of 5%. And then she had 6 out of 100, and all of a sudden you are pre-diabetic. And then 7.
Interesting.
So there was just a difference of 3 out of 100, and you go from super healthy to full-blown diabetic. And that was like such a great
that is
visual to see.
Great visual. That would be a great visual. And have you ever checked yours at home, your A1C at home?
I did. When I did the line diet last year, I checked it, I think 6 weeks in or so, and it was 4.8.
Yeah, I did. When my thyroid was really out of whack, I did it. I did it at the office, and it was 5.2. It was my first A1C ever when I got my fasting insulin. So it was 5.2. Okay, 5.2. And then I did it 2 months later. 2 months later, and my thyroid had, look at it. Sorry, guys.
It's this.
Sorry. And so 2 months later, my thyroid had started to tank, and it was up to 5.6 2 months later. And then I did one here. I got 2 packs of them. I did one here, and it was 5.0. And then I did it a month later, and it was 5.6. And now remember, my thyroid's tanking at this point. And then I got back from the low carb cruise and redid it. And it was 4.9. And I did it on 2 separate days. So I did it one day, one the next day. It was 4.9 one day and 5.1 the next day. So I'm averaging about 5. I'm averaging about 5, which is good. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what it ever was before.
At around 5.2.
That's good. I mean, really, it's good.
It's good when you think that 5 years ago, I was on 50 units of insulin, and I was on 2,000 milligram of metformin. The highest dose.
Yeah, that's the highest.
I never ever tolerated it. Not even the extended release one. It's just horrible.
Most people can't tolerate extended release. Believe it or not, I've seen patients go from having being on the extended release, and being like, I can't handle this. So they go back to being the twice a day immediate release, because if not, they don't come out of the bathroom. And these are usually hospice patients that we haven't discontinued metformin because it's pretty benign. So they go, so we will be like, oh, they put you on extended release. How about we pull you off that? And then their diarrhea goes away. That's a comfort measure that we do. So
I was doing a little bit better on extended release, but still. And
I tried berberine. I tried it.
I never tried that one. I wanted to, but then I saw that video.
Pooping my brains out. Guys, no, I don't care if you think it's great, and I was trying, we're talking like one of the top-notch brands. It's not cheap.
It's got to be good brand because it's a supplement. So it can come from the cheapest place in, I'm not going to name a country, but, or it can be, can come from a reputable brand. So,
Yep. Oh, it was a reputable brand.
but even
I'll tell you, it was
metformin has
sports.
been
It was sports
recalled like a
research.
few times.
Yeah, it was sports research, which is a great brand. And I've seen other people, they take it and they do really well. Me and my husband took it.
Was it
Our
Thorn
like
research, you said?
no
Thorn?
sports research.
Okay, so there's
Sports research.
Thorn also, which is supposed to be good brand.
Yes, that's a very good brand too. My husband and me both, we were so sick to our stomachs. And then we were just peeing out of our bum. It was just like it was pee poo.
Thanks
Like
for that visual. I actually like my visual with the A1C better, but yes, thanks.
sorry. No, well, I want people to understand that if you start taking these recommended supplements, and we weren't even taking the recommended dosage, if you take these supplements, there's a reason why it's called nature's metformin. And metformin makes you poop your brains out. There's a reason. Like, so be careful with supplements that promise you amazing things, because there's still, it's, even if it's natural, I could do a whole other talk on natural supplements. Maybe one day.
Let's do that next.
Next time we can talk about supplements, especially herbs. I'm an amateur herbalist. Not a lot of y'all know that, amateur herbalist, but natural supplements still have side effects because they are still a medicine. They may not be a pharmaceutical medicine.
Like red rice yeast. It's basically the same. Okay,
most
but
of the
let's
time,
not get into this now.
Yeah, that's usually brought over from China, and they actually put what was it? Latorvastatin in it. It actually had statins.
Awesome.
They found out, they were started testing batches, and they're like, this is red rice yeast. No, it's not. It was actually a statin that they had packaged as red rice yeast. So the same with horny goat weed for men. Okay. If we know what horny goat weed is for, you can think about it in the name, horny goat weed. It was coming over from China, and they started testing batches, and it had Viagra in it.
But it was working, apparently.
It was working, and which is fine, but it was a drug that was not labeled as a drug.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful on your supplements. Please buy them from a reputable company, preferably one that is made in the United States, so you know that their actual facilities and their products have been at least somewhat. Or Canada, maybe Canada. I don't know anything about Canada other than it's our northern neighbors. I'm horrible.
That's fine.
And it's still semi under British something or other. It's still a British something or other.
Yeah, we do have a king. That's true.
You have a king, but you're not ruled.
Exactly.
So
that's kind of neat. I would say, I think we're coming up to an hour, or we're a little over. I didn't
maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't care.
Let's wrap this up. So next time we are going to chat about herbs, and then we want to chat about thyroid.
I would love to chat. I would love to talk about thyroid. I find it super fascinating.
About calories in and calories out.
Oh, good Lord, don't get me started.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here.
That would be crazy.
Yes.
We need Bart K in there on that one.
Oh, yeah, we have to. Alrighty. See you next time.
Bye, guys.